Welcome to part 3 of our Western Australian folklore series. Without any further introduction, let's get stuck into the stories. The following stories are from the book Full Steam Ahead by John Willinge. This story is called Fast First Aid. In the early days at the port of Bunbury, the long jetty was busy and quite congested. One major concern was quickly transporting injured workers through the congestion to the local hospital. It wasn't possible to drive an ambulance along the jetty, so a plan was worked out, and all that was needed was an opportunity to test it. Not long after the plan had been agreed, a Dutch ship with a Chinese crew called into the port. It turned out that one of the Chinese crew was ill and needed to be taken to the local hospital as quickly as possible. The plan swung into motion. A small steam locomotive with a specially designed flat floor to take the stretcher was sent along the jetty to collect the sick crewman. The emergency crew collected the Chinese seaman from the top of the gangway and took him to the railway station, where he was loaded into an ambulance and rushed to the hospital, where he was put into a bed to await the arrival of a doctor. The whole operation had taken just 36 minutes, and everyone involved was very pleased with the result. As people were congratulating each other on the success of the new emergency plan, a phone call came through from the ship, asking why nobody had arrived to collect the sick seaman. It turned out that the man collected had been on watch duty at the top of the gangplank, and due to his lack of English skills, he had been whisked away to the hospital instead of the sick man. We can only wonder what the seaman thought of the whole situation. Our next story, from the same book, is called Happy Workers. One day, a group of waterside workers seemed unusually happy as they went about their work. The ship's chief officer went to their supervisor and reported that the ship was carrying large casks of wine, and he didn't know how, but he was sure the workers were getting into the casks somehow and helping themselves. The supervisor went down to where the casks were stored to find out what was going on, and after a bit of investigation, he discovered that the men had bored small holes and inserted a tap so that during their smoko and lunch break, they could add just a little bit more to their drinks. Needless to say, they were read the riot act, and things went back to their usual routine. The next story is from the book The Sound of the Cockies by B. and J. Bunbury. At the small town of Coron, the railway siding included a refreshment room, not surprisingly called The Refresh. The place provided snacks, tea and coffee, and also boasted a bar where thirsty travellers could slake their thirst while waiting for a train. The bar was supposed to be open only when the train was stopped at the station, but as the nearest hotel was 16 kilometres away in Finnerty, the bar often stayed open long after the train had departed. One day, 2 young policemen were doing the rounds of the farms, and they returned to Coron in the evening. They could see the lights of the Refresh were still on, and knew that the bar was still open when it should have been closed hours before. One officer went up to the front door and the other to the back, and they hammered on the doors, calling, "Open up! Police here!" Suddenly, all the lights inside went out, and they could hear a lot of scrambling around. They walked in and turned on their torches, only to find the proprietor stretched out on the counter with his shirt pulled up, and a visiting doctor standing over him with a stethoscope. The 2 policemen burst out laughing and said, "Get down, you silly fool, and get us a drink." Also, from The Sound of the Cockies, comes this story, which I've called Illiterate Pigs Beware. John O'Day built the first structure of any significance in the town of Finnerty. With his wife, he ran a makeshift restaurant and catered to the culinary needs of the railway workers. Joe kept a number of animals, but they were rarely restrained, and often wandered into the crop fields of local farmers. One put up a notice saying, "Poison laid here," but Joe just responded, "My pigs can't read. The farmer's response was to shoot one of the pigs. The last story in this episode comes from a book called The Outback Trail by A.J. Luck, published by Hesperian Press. It's called That Sinking Feeling. One day, we came to a grassy flat. I thought that we might get water there at a shallow depth by sinking, so we made camp. I got the pick and shovel while my mate unpacked and made the fire. I started sinking with a will. Later, my mate called out that tea was ready, but I worked on a bit longer. I could hardly swallow my tea quickly enough. I was so impatient to get back to the sinking. At 5 or 6 feet, it began to get damp. Night came on, but I kept going. Until at 7 feet, the water began to come in. So I kept on sinking. The water was there all right, but I had to make room for storage. I filled every dish and billy and other container and bailed it out. Yep, we got a good drink for the camels. It must have been 12 o'clock that night when I finally lay down. At dawn, I was out to have a look at my handiwork. It was beautiful, clear, fresh water. Then I went to get the camels. I came closer. Ye gods! Before me was enough water to float a ship, and the camels were distended like blown-up frogs. Such is life, either feast or famine.